little bit? A deep dive. Okay, we have a deep dive. Before we get started, we have one guy that hadn't been here, and I'd like for him to introduce himself. Everybody probably knows him. Don, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, thank you. My name is Don LaBiche. I'm an architect here in Beaumont. I graduated from LSU in '83. Came to Beaumont my whole professional life in architecture. I've lived here in Beaumont, so I felt that I wanted to serve on this committee because I think that seeing a view from an architect about building and about improvements in the city is very important. So look forward to serving with all of you and appreciate the opportunity.
Well, man, we're glad to have you and all the expertise you have. He and I go back some 30, 35 years. I hadn't seen him in probably 20 years. But it's good to see you, man. I'm glad you're part of this advisory committee. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, just for the record, Jeff Barton with Gap Strategies. And let's see, Carol, we're having just a little trouble with the... That would explain it. Okay. Thank you. There we go. Well, again, for those of you in the audience or anybody who doesn't know, I'm Jeff Barton. This is Kara Buffington. Joey Ochoa is here. We're with Gap Strategies. And then there's a team behind us if we need them. Or some of them are working on parts of this project. You have a few handouts tonight. You should have our presentation for tonight. We've got some updates. We also, the city's provided you with some maintenance and operations budgets. So we'll be going over a lot of those today. And we actually have a lot of interesting things to cover. So we'll do just a little bit of setting goals for tonight and then talk about a review of the financial implications that we've talked about before, where we are on those. Very briefly, some of the things we've covered before. Then we're going to go into, as the chairman said, a deep dive on infrastructure. Talk especially about roads and sidewalks and the associated drainage and water, wastewater that goes with those. We'll be prioritizing that, much like we did last time, using some electronic voting, but also some discussion. It's a little bit shorter list. Then we'll take you back through, many of you did homework that we got about the parks and facilities, parks rec and facilities. We'll be going over that and trying to finalize those lists. We have a little bit of new information based on the feedback that we got from you all. And we'll talk about next steps and what's coming up next week. So that's a really big show for tonight. But the main gist of tonight is to really prioritize roads and sidewalks, and then to go back over these parks and facilities that we talked about last time and see if we all agree and feel good about where we are. So, as we talk about recap, a few things we want to touch on. We promised you a little bit of information about the legislative session. So, as you know, it ended. We haven't had a chance to talk to your bond counsel. He wasn't able to get back to us, but we've been following these pretty closely. So we'll wait for the final word from your lawyers, but I think most of the bills that would have dramatically affected the bond process did not make it out of the session, but there are two that I want to mention that Kara was tracking. So Senate Bill 1025 did pass. So after September 1st, that shouldn't affect Beaumont if you call a bond election this time, but any bonds in the future, then there's some new language that has to be added, that in capital letters it has to say this is a tax rate increase. So that gets a little complicated because sometimes in some cities you may be growing your tax base enough that it's not an increase in the actual taxes, but it is an increase in the tax rate usually. Then House Bill 3526 also has some new reporting requirements that just complicate things a little bit on the city side, but shouldn't affect your deliberations. So as you recall, there were some that were a little bit more dramatic, and those made it pretty far in the legislative session. So I think it's fair to say the legislature's focused in on bonds and their use, but they did not pass. Then a reminder of where we are here, about midway, a little more than midway through the process, perhaps. Our meeting tonight, number 4. Next time, we'll be talking about downtown and many of the architectural projects that are going on downtown. We have the open house, just to remind you, that begins on July 4th at the City Celebration, so that people can fill it out in paper copy or pick it up on a QR code and go. We will be presenting at that celebration and online in virtual meetings then. Your deliberations so far?
I apologize for interrupting. I know you mentioned at the July 4th celebration, the survey will be made available. Have there been any considerations for offering that same opportunity at the Juneteenth celebration coming up?
It's a great question. Yeah, we thought about Juneteenth being such a big celebration here, and we just don't think we're going to be quite ready. We've got meeting number 5 on June 25th, but maybe we can put out some information just urging people to look at the website just to stay involved. We
can also put together flyers that have a QR code where people can scan and they could enter in their cell phone number or their email address, and then they would be texted or emailed when the virtual open house goes live. And just as a reminder to us all, it won't just be a survey, it will both be a place where people can express opinions, and there will be a survey portion of it, but it will also be educational, so they can find out about what your work has been, the city has been doing, so they can learn about the process and then do their.
So our goal is at the end of that meeting on the 25th to have a sense of direction, not your final cut, right? But a number of things that'll be in our tier 1 category. You may have some things in a lot of things in tier 3, which will kind of take off the table. And then there may be some things in tier 2 still that you want to go out to the community and say, hey, here are the things we're leaning toward. Here are some things we're undecided about, and we'd like to get your input. And then the formal open house, or the in-person part of it at least, will come July 12th. In between, we'll also be checking in with City Council to see, if there's any last words of wisdom from Council about how they're leaning that they want to pass on to the committee. Then we'll come back late in July and present you with what we heard at the open house, a lot of data about that. You'll have had a chance to contemplate on your decision so far, and we'll come up with a final recommendation to go to council. So we've been talking a lot about priorities, and we haven't added in funding yet. Like, we've talked a little bit about funding, right? What the costs are, what the overall costs are. And one of the things I just want to let you know is we are going to get to this place where we really push on not just priorities in one category, but across categories, and also compared to a possible tax increase. How bad do you want this, right? Right now, what we've done in here is just say, what are your top priorities? And increasingly, we will begin to add money into that mixture. If we have time, we'll do a little bit of that at the end of the meeting tonight. And if we're running late, then we'll do that quite a bit next meeting, Mr. Chair. We also may have a little bit of additional homework just to tease out those ideas for you about what you're willing to spend. A little bit, we've talked about it, but I know this is it's worth touching on again. I think this idea of our tiers, and we have got a couple of slides on that. Just a refresher, tier 1 really represents those projects that at the moment you want to move forward. That doesn't mean you can't change your mind in subsequent meetings, but at the moment, yes, I think I'd like this to be on the bond. Tier 2, again, is a maybe, and it may be because you're unsure, and it may be because you want more information or you want to hear some debate on it. But any of those go into tier 2, And as we move forward, we'll spend more and more time on Tier 2, these areas of decision. And then Tier 3 is we're taking it off the table for now. Not necessarily because it's a bad project. It might be a great project, but the time is not ripe either because we don't have enough data or enough information, or it's just not as urgent, or it is funded somewhere else. And I know there was some, a little bit of confusion about that last time as we talked about things that are funded somewhere else. Some of those projects are actually funded elsewhere. Others are intended to be funded elsewhere, which means really that the city plans to put them in this year's budget, and those budget workshops are going on now, or in next year's budget, or there's a grant application already in, where the city has used these CO projects, which is another form of short-term, usually shorter-term, smaller financing to do projects. I also want to just remind us all, it's come up in some of the questions, and I know some of the press, even some of the staff are wanting to make sure we've got these numbers down. So you may have seen something in the city CAP, or you might see something in press talk about a number, and there may be a different number in your worksheets. And just a reminder, that's because we've taken the cost developed by the city, and we have added contingency, meaning just we don't know what might happen, particularly right now. For instance, there are tariffs coming on steel and limestone that just went into effect last week that are really affecting construction prices. So we've added a little bump for some extra contingency, and we've tried to take an early guess at when this project might come online, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, because this bond is a longer-term bond, and added some inflation into that.
So Jeff, my question is, on this one sheet of paper, we have a 10% contingency. Are you saying that it may have to be a little bit more than that because of that?
No, that's what that number is.
Okay.
That's the number we've added. Nothing additional to that. So, but I just want you to know that that's not the cost estimate that was developed by the city. That's us putting some additional contingency on top of that.
Got you.
So as we get farther and talking to your city staff, there are some projects in here where they feel like they have a very accurate picture of the costs. And there we've just put 5 or 10%, just so that as we get later to see what happens over this summer, for example, as these tariffs go into place.
Gotcha.
There's other places where even staff says, gosh, this is difficult to estimate, and you may see we've got 15 or 20% contingency added into the project. In many of those cases, they've added a small contingency number. We've bumped that up because we want to be sure, if we can, that as we get to the end of the process, we're not going to surprise you by coming back and saying, oh, wait, we need a little bit extra.
Right.
Your city financial advisor, let's see. Oops. I'm sure it's my fault. Phasing will also affect your final costs. So we've covered this briefly before, but just as a reminder, not all of the bonds have to be issued at once, right? Let's just take a number. If you decide you're going to do $100 million in bonds, for the road projects, for instance, you'll have to do some engineering, some surveying, acquire right-of-way, acquire utility easements, move those utilities out. So the real construction money may not be needed until year 2 or year 3 or year 4. So there is a place that we'll be fine-tuning this as we go. You might be able to sell only, in fact, you typically would sell one tranche of those bonds, maybe 10 or 20 million to get started on projects right away. Then a year from now, you sell another 20 or 30 million as those costs come online. That means you're not paying interest on the whole 100 million the whole time. So we hope we'll be able to save a little bit of money that way. And then your financial advisor has also prepared this. You've seen it before, but as we get into these priorities tonight, it's good to be reminded that with no increase you can probably get about 16 million or so off a bond, and just the rising values would cover that payment. A $5 increase, and that's about 4.5 cents on the tax rate, would get you something like 86, 87 million. $10 a month, 158. $15 a month, 228. And then you'd get up close to, if you went to $20 a month on the average homeowner, that would get you up around 300,000. So again, these are figured on the average homeowner in Beaumont, of a home in Beaumont.
What was that last figure, 300,000?
It would be about, you could get about 300 million, a little bit more, I believe.
Of the taxable entities out there within the city, the commercial, the industrial, apartments, everybody. And what percentage does the homeowners make up of that total tax dollars collected?
I couldn't tell you in Beaumont. I haven't looked at it. I glanced at something early on about it, but do you know offhand?
No, and typically it's obviously the largest percentage, the residential.
Homeowner or the industrial?
Well, it could go either way.
I think it's important that we know that the homeowners are not sharing the burden of this whole thing. That
It is a great point,
Yeah.
and just to reiterate what you said, all industry pays, any taxpayer pays. Many people do have the idea that it's just homeowners. It is all business, it is all industry, unless you're tax exempt.
And that is something we will look into and try to have that for the
I'd
next
like to know
meeting.
what percentage is homeowners versus everybody else.
That shouldn't be hard to get.
We also talked a little bit last time just about maintenance and operations. If you've got questions for staff, you can ask them, but we've handed out a sheet that you all should have. If you don't have it, raise your hand and Joey can get it to you. Just a snapshot of maintenance and operations. You'll see on some of those projects might come with pretty substantial maintenance and operations obligations, others much less. A few changes and updates that I really want to call to your attention. The staff and the council are continuing to refine the CIP as they move forward in the budget process. So there are a lot of little notations that we're making. Most of these don't affect you because they're really on Tier 3 projects, right? They're projects that are being funded elsewhere. We just want you to know staff is tracking them, we're tracking them with staff. And so it could change something if you have a question about Tier 3. There are some, though, that are worth noting. First of all, parks and sports clarification. It really comes out, I want to congratulate you guys because some of the discussion we had here that has helped clarify some of this. We had some discussion at one of our meetings about, a rec center for the south side. Is that covered in downtown? How does the sports affect that? And in really some meetings with your staff and our group since then, there was kind of a nomenclature problem that has gotten cleared up now on the CIP. So there are two separate projects that need to be thought of. One is the downtown sports complex that was being talked about like a downtown rec center. So it's now officially had its name changed to Downtown Sports Complex. So, and that's led people, I think, to really think through how those need to work. So we've got some clarity. The Downtown Sports Complex is this larger facility that, may attract out
29 million.
a larger facility and attracts people from the region maybe to come in and spend money, right? Then separately is a South Side Rec Center. So those have now been changed on the matrix, but there's one additional thing that you need to know. The sports complex, the downtown sports complex, is still being suggested by staff as something they'd like you to look at, whether you might want to include it on a bond. The South Side Rec Center, at the current time, staff's identified some grants that they believe will pay for that South Side Rec Center. So it is listed in Tier 3 as funded by other sources for the time being. Then police facilities. we had some good discussion here and in the homework, comments from people as they were doing the homework about police facilities. We may have some folks from the police department here. Yeah, there they are in the back. So lost you. If you've got more questions about that last time. But as we talked about facilities, what we heard from a lot of you is, yeah, police facilities were important to you. You were concerned about the overcrowding and the growth in the department since the primary building they're in. I think there's, Chief, seven buildings that you deal with, but your primary police station has, the department's outgrown it. You put that in Tier 2, so you wanted it to continue to be considered, but also in your homework, it stayed in Tier 2, okay? It was ranked 3rd among those facilities that you still wanted to consider. In talking to your staff and the police department, there might be a way to address this. One of the issues we heard most from you, from several of you, is, well, we want to help, but that's a really big number, 75 million. Is there a way to phase that? Is there a way to bring that in slowly? Is there a way to cut back on that? In talking to Chief and your other staff members, administration, I think the Chief, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I guess I will, because that's what he said, is that it's difficult to phase that in and be very effective. However, we are recommending that instead you consider a facilities assessment that would be for all the facilities across the city. You don't have a current up-to-date citywide facilities assessment, and this would be bringing in someone, probably an architecture firm or a combination of architecture and construction firms. There's firms that around the state that specialize in that. Come in and look at the police department, for example. Not just that it's overcrowded, but what are the needs today and what are the needs likely to be 10, 20, and 30 years into the future. So you're looking at all kinds of things like crime reporting rooms, crime evidence rooms. How many officers do you think you might add over the 5 or 10 years? They come and do space studies and then develop much more robust cost estimates.
Jeff, my question is, wouldn't that lead you to looking at the old 30-year-old building to build another one? I mean, when you say look
yes,
at
it sure would, Mr. Chair, but it would give you, what it would do is get, and you all may not want to do this, but we were looking for how do we get some relief to the police department, begin to work on the project, right? Begin to work on the problem without the $75 million bill. So $75 million is a pretty good number in talking to your staff, but they don't have absolute confidence in it. And that's why it was listed originally in the CIP as not for current consideration, but in out years. We moved that up and said, well, we want it to be a priority, or at least a potential priority, I should say. But in talking to staff, they said, well, one of our concerns is we had it out in the out years for future consideration because we're concerned that our numbers aren't tight enough on what some of this specialty equipment would cost, what some of the specialty finish out in a police station, which is highly specialized, would cost. And as policing changes in the United States, as the city grows, what do we really want to be planning for? And everything, I mean, in places that I've worked in other cities, that might be, how many rooms do you really want for, sometimes it's done in a hospital, sometimes at a jail, or sometimes at a police station, rape examinations, criminal investigations, privacy rooms. How many investigative rooms do you need for detectives versus police? I know the police department's already done a lot of work on that, but a facilities study would come in and tease that out to the next level so that 2, 3, 5 years down the road, whenever you're ready to address the police department, you have tighter numbers and you have this long-term view. So that would be the pros, but you guys can decide that. And the cost difference is pretty extreme. A facility study to do the police station, but while you're at it, do other city facilities like the city hall that might need to be upgraded over time. That would be, somewhere under $500,000 versus $75 million, and it would set this, so it would not be giving the police department immediate relief. That's the downside.
Right.
But on the upside, it would be a step toward setting the table for both the police department and other critical facilities.
Would you include the fire station in that, or is that just?
That, there were 3 facilities that you all said you wanted to continue to consider. The fire station, the animal shelter, I'll call it animal care, and police. In your homework, and we'll talk more about this later, but it's worth pausing to discuss now. In your homework, they ranked exactly that way, fire station, animal care, and police. And the cutoff really, there was significant support for the top 2. I think I have them in the right order. We'll see it later. But those 2 really stayed in Tier 1, and the police station there was a break and stayed in Tier 2. So we took that as, we are not trying to direct you on that. We just took it as direction to ourselves to get with the city and think about, okay, there's some ambivalence about that $75 million number and building the police station now. There's a little bit of ambivalence on staff about those numbers being tight. So what else could we do that's productive?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, one thing that we need to make sure that everybody knows here too is that the police department is not just working out of one building. The police department has 2 buildings full.
Or more. Yeah,
It's actually,
So that's a big problem
Yes.
on how do you
We-
do it in phases and get the right people in the right place.
Absolutely. They talked about that last week. Maybe, I think somebody, I don't know who it was last week, say maybe it was 7 different spots.
and Chief, it is 7, right?
Yeah, okay.
So
Yes.
a facility study would begin to look at those and see, well, how many of those do we keep? Do you build one huge building? Do you have a couple of different buildings? How do you phase that as our architect tells us? So when we get tonight, I just want you to be aware of that. We're going to go back and revisit Parks tonight, and that'll be one of the big changes. So you'll have that just as an option. Police station is still on there as an option, but so will be a facility study. Cameras in parks. If you saw your homework, we addressed this a little bit. One of the things that you wanted to move was security cameras in parks was a high priority for the committee. In further talk with their IT people and some of their frontline folks, the city says actually they have found some money to do that elsewhere. Some of those have already been installed. They've brought the cost down a little bit from what they first thought it might be, and they think they can pay for that elsewhere.
Good.
So we have, some of it is already paid for. That's the good news, and on its way or being installed or installed. So if you saw in your homework, for those of you who saw the homework, we struck through that. You can bring it back if you want to, but it looked like to us, an easy place that maybe you can save a little money on the bond. So those are the big changes. There are some other small ones, but those are the primary ones that really call to the sorts of issues you've been discussing. Again, the matrix, you've gotten an updated matrix tonight in hard copy from us. I think staff, you should have some also back there, but all of you on the committee should have matrix for Parks and Trails, looking at the work that you did last time and the homework based on the homework assignments. So Parks, Trails, and Recreation, so including the golf course. And then you also have the latest spreadsheet on matrix, if you want to call it that, on infrastructure, which we will discuss later tonight. Just as a reminder, this column is just our code, this P11, just something that we can all use to refer to projects internally. Then there's a project name. we will have staff come up tonight if you have any. I was running around last time, so we've gotten, we'll be a little more efficient tonight. We're going to ask staff to come up here if you want descriptions or a little reminder of what these projects are. Then we've talked about contingency, an inflation number, and then our tiers, which we discussed. So are the matrix making sense to everybody at this point? Anything I need to cover on those?
Now, is that since we did our homework?
Yeah, the ones that you have include the homework.
Okay.
So we worked this weekend to incorporate that in there, so those should be really up to date. Now, there's a little bit of tweaking constantly going on these as projects are moving around. I mean, that's part of the budget we're in a budget process at the same time over at the city. But this should be really good information. If you see a problem, just call it to our attention. Glad to fix it. We'll be giving you updates each time. A reminder that if you want more information, the spreadsheets we keep are longer. We're just trying not to burden you with quite so much information. But we've got spreadsheets that have a little more description and that also say where the project was recommended from, say out of the CIP or out of the Parks Plan. And also for the Tier 3 projects, we keep track of if they're funded elsewhere, where is that? So we'll try and, between us and staff, I think we can address most questions you might have about that this evening. So our first big issue tonight is going to be infrastructure. And just to remind you, that infrastructure was one of the questions on the community survey, and it scored very high. In particular, roads were the #1 issue in all 4 wards. We've talked to you, there was a little bit of confusion about, roads, is it brand new roads or rebuilding roads? But roads scored very high, so did sidewalks, and they scored highly across kind of all racial and demographic categories. So with that in mind, I think Molly is going to come up, and I'll let her introduce herself and talk to you about roads, and then we'll have some discussion. Or not just roads, but about infrastructure. And it's all your slides there with just one kind of introductory slide about how you've looked at that I think you'll figure out.
Okay. Thank you. Good evening. A little shorter. Good evening. I'm Molly Villarreal, Public Works Director for the City of Beaumont. And today I will be speaking to you about the infrastructure as it relates to the bond program. And of course, if there's any questions about the capital program as well, be able to answer those hopefully as well. So the staff has reviewed infrastructure across the board. I'm going to read this one with y'all. Most water, sewer, street and drainage, repair and rehabilitation projects are typically addressed by other funding sources. So our water and wastewater infrastructure typically comes from the revenue bonds that are paid by our water and sanitary sewer rates. Then most of the street and drainage projects that are part of repair and rehabilitation typically are funded through certificates of obligation and not so much through a general obligation bond. But we have identified a handful of projects that we felt are suitable for general obligation funds, and these are typically those that are related to expansion of current systems. So we're not going, in the case that the bond election not be successful, and then we would not be able to pursue a critical repair rehabilitation project for however many years until that time has elapsed before we can do that project. So we don't want to shut ourselves out from repair and rehabilitation and improvement of existing services as we currently have them. So the proposed projects that we have are the Major Sidewalk Initiative, and we have 3 new streets. 2 new streets, but we broke it into phases. So the first is our sidewalk master plan and sidewalk improvement initiative. One thing that I have learned in my time at Public Works is the importance of improving the walkability of the city of Beaumont. And a sidewalk master plan is that first step to provide a clear, long-term strategy for improving this pedestrian infrastructure. It gives us a framework where we can collect and respond to citizen input. I know that during the survey process, we did receive feedback from citizens who wanted to discuss particular sidewalk projects, and we're disappointed that the survey as it currently stands did not have a space for that. But that space is typically reserved for our master planning efforts. It also provides the quantifiable data and helps us identify where the gaps are in our infrastructure, where are the locations that need to be prioritized. Besides just schools, we all recognize that schools definitely are pedestrian generators, but also our transit stops, our commercial areas, our medical areas are all part of this matrix that should consider future strategic planning of our sidewalks. It also promotes the Americans with Disabilities Act compliance, which is critical to meet the mobility needs of our community, and ultimately will inform our budgeting and capital planning. There are some projects that are critical, but simply the costs have to be more creative with the funding, whereas those where we can have the most bang for our buck, this allows us to identify those locations and move forward with our planning. So the photographs that you have here, this is our Finette Road sidewalk project in front of Beaumont United High School. We are very happy that we were able to move forward with this project. This has been a much-needed sidewalk for many, many years, and finally now we have the opportunity to get it done. One of the things that is important to know about this project is that the location, the site, all the things that needed to come together to maximize our dollar per foot of sidewalk really did come together in this project. So we are looking forward to a successful project that should be completed before the students return to class.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Just for, I'm very familiar with this project right there in front of Beaumont United.
Yes, sir.
As an example, I see how long it is. About how much does that cost? Just that area?
Glad you brought that up, and I will address that in a future slide.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So what are the cost variables that go into a sidewalk project? Again, every construction project is unique and is site-specific. Our right-of-way acquisition, always. If you have to acquire property, that can drag out a project, the duration, and also the costs associated with reimbursing the property owner for that right-of-way if they are not so kind as to donate it or provide it to us at a minimal cost. Also to and I'm going to go a little bit out of order here, but there's also some other site improvements that need to be made, which are our storm sewer and drainage improvements. If there's an open ditch that needs to be piped in order for the sidewalk to be constructed, that has a huge impact on the cost. And I'll give you an example in a later slide of what those cost impacts can reach. Also, too, if there are retaining walls, so we don't have a whole lot of retaining walls that have to happen in southeast Texas because we are so exceedingly flat terrain. But there are some locations like along Washington Boulevard as part of the Washington Boulevard project between 7th and 8th Streets where the site was built up, but in order to maintain ADA compliance for the slopes of the ramp, you have to construct a retaining wall. And so that does add significantly to the cost. Also, any other grade adjustments where you have to meet these slope requirements. As part of meeting those slope requirements, the sidewalk itself will affect the drainage pattern as the site drains to the city street. And so that is also important to take into consideration. I have designed my share of sidewalks with Mr. Labiche here, so I definitely have enjoyed the challenges of meeting ADA compliance regulations. The construction of sidewalk ramps in and of themselves is expensive. I don't know those who recall when TxDOT had a Ramps to Nowhere sidewalk project. They had received a grant for improving pedestrian mobility, and they installed sidewalks along MLK, along Major Drive, and they went to nowhere. And what they had decided is that it was better to install the ramps and then basically let somebody else figure out how to tie the sidewalks together so people could actually use them. Then we also have things, the lighting and pedestrian safety improvements. If it is going to be part of a trails plan, if it's going to be part of a parks plan, you're going to need safety and security lighting, or if the path for the sidewalk has road crossings, you've got to make sure that you've got the proper crosswalks. Does the crosswalk need to be signalized? Do you need pedestrian actuators? All those things do affect the cost. And of course, tree removal, root barriers, and landscaping. So for example, the sidewalks on Calder that have the trees, they started out as live oaks, and I think we have a lot of crepe myrtles now. But where each of those trees is planted is a significant concrete box that serves as a root barrier. So it's not something that you can see from the surface, but it is something that adds to the cost of the project. So I'll give you some cost estimate examples. So my first example is a project currently under construction, the Finette Road. It's just about 1 mile long, and the construction cost is currently $784,000. So that comes to about $148 per linear foot. The length of the project is from 4th Street to Sarah Street, and it had minimal utility and grade conflicts. I think we had to move 2 guy wires out of the way, and we had adequate right-of-way for this project. We did not have any major drainage crossings, minimal amount of crosswalks and pedestrian crossings. So this has been a good project for us to show what, when everything comes together, this is how the cost that you could see in a project. 2 more examples. These are cost estimates that we have prepared in response to requests from either neighbors, citizens, or an agency. And the first one is Phelan Boulevard. This is from Major Drive to Dowland Road. It's a little over a mile, 1.1 miles. Right now, our current cost estimate is at $915,000. There's $75,000 to install 2 crossings, because right now the most cost-effective solution that we have found so far is to install the sidewalk on the north side of Phelan, but you would have to divert the pedestrian traffic into the median to cross at the DD6 ditch, because there is a pedestrian crossing over the eastbound lanes, and then you would have to move the traffic back over to the original alignment. If we don't utilize that crossing at the DD6 ditch, then we would have to make extensive modifications to that bridge. So if the community is willing to forego that inconvenience of crossing Phelan, which is not insignificant at all, to cross the ditch, to go back to the north, we can come in closer to that original estimate. But if we need to make any additional changes to that crossing, then the costs ramp up. And I currently, at the moment, don't have cost estimates for that. Another project that has been suggested is along Jim Gilligan Way, Florida Avenue. This is just under a half a mile that would take you from Rolfe Christopher Drive to MLK Parkway. There's the apartment complex that is on MLK at Jim Gilligan, and this would connect those students to the campus. Current estimate right now is about $500,000. Of that, there's a railroad crossing, and the cost estimate to address that railroad crossing is at about $150,000. And this is comparable to the pedestrian crossing that we installed on 4th Street, just north of College. So we're confident in that cost estimate, but again, something that comes up that will start driving the costs up. So you're seeing that we've gone from $148 a foot, now we're over $200 a foot for the sidewalk.
Holly,
Sir?
what's the width of those sidewalks?
Most of these sidewalks we're estimating at 5 feet, except in those areas where we have to narrow it down to avoid an obstruction. So our next estimate that we prepared is along Helbig Road. This is one that we often get calls about. It's a little bit over a mile, and this would take you from East Lucas Drive to Maida Street. The current cost estimate's about $3.5 million. Now you're getting up to you're just north of $600 per foot of sidewalk. And the lion's share of that cost, that $2.1 million, is to enclose the ditch that runs along Helbig Road to accommodate a sidewalk within the existing right-of-way. If you were to forego piping in that ditch, you would have to acquire right-of-way, so you're still going to see significant costs with that. And we recognize that there is definitely a need. Unfortunately, we can't utilize, or we've not seen any indications that we would be able to utilize the west side of Helbig Road. That is owned by the railroad, and they're very selfish about how they use their right-of-way. Talk to me about quiet zones later. So that's the Helbig Road estimate. Another project that was presented to us by citizens during the course of the survey was Old Dowland Road, and that's about a half a mile. Cost for that is about $1.6 million. Now we're at $633 per linear foot to take you from Northwest Parkway to Dowland Road. This would connect that series of apartment complexes to the commercial districts at Dowland Road. There's about $1 million within that cost estimate of $1.6 million for drainage modifications to accommodate the sidewalk within the right-of-way. Again, piping in the ditches, it does get expensive. And this is to utilizing less expensive construction materials. Instead of going with concrete pipe, using high-density polypropylene pipe to try to find the cost savings where we can, to make sure that we get the adequate service life for it. So,
I have a quick question.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to make sure I understood. These potential projects that you've gone through, these are the ones that have been identified by citizens as things that we would like to see?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And I have, for all the citizens that have reached out, that have mentioned these projects to us, I have strongly encouraged them that, we've kept track of all that, is when we open up for citizen engagement during the master planning process, to please bring these projects with you. So that's why I want to have that citizen input, because those that are aware of it right now, they are reaching out, but we want to make sure that we're not missing any unmet needs.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
You're welcome. So do we have any more questions? This is my last slide on sidewalks, if we have any questions.
I just have a quick comment, and good evening, everyone. Ms. Villarreal, Mr. Chair. And initially, when I saw those numbers, it seemed like, $1 million to $3 million for about a mile of sidewalk. Sounds like a very daunting number. Sounds like a high number. But after doing a little bit of research on the topic, I know that it is important for safety. People, sometimes they tend to walk on the streets as opposed to being able to walk on the sidewalks. It helps to keep them safe. Also encourages more walking in the city. In addition to that, neighbors can see each other. They're more likely to interact with each other.
Yes.
Businesses, also, you may get some more foot traffic to shops and restaurants in the area. And there was another interesting point that maybe you could add some data points here if you have any, but regarding property values, areas where there are sidewalks tend to maybe increase the property value. Maybe that could offset potential increase in costs. Is that a factor here?
It's funny, my first research paper in the MPA program was about this very program. And the property values can be viewed both ways. So there was a project when I was still in private consulting to do a road, and they included the sidewalks with that. When they had the community meeting to present the project to the impacted neighbors, they very strongly voiced their opposition to the sidewalks. So it's like, but you have the pedestrians, and they're like, yes, they need somewhere to walk, but not in my yard. So it is an interesting conversation to have. And the other thing about sidewalk master planning that I neglected to mention is that our sidewalk maintenance ordinance is a relic from its time when it was adopted. It has not been updated since then. And so also as part of that, and having the consultants who specialize in this type of planning, to make sure that our ordinances reflect the best practices that are being seen across the nation, because there's definitely some thought on how our sidewalk ordinances can be adjusted and amended to make sure that the sidewalks that we currently have are in the best condition that they can be. Because currently it falls to the property owner who owns the property to maintain their sidewalk. And so it becomes more of a civil issue, but we want to make sure that we are following the best practices.
Sure. I had just had one quick follow-up. I don't mean to hog the floor here, but I looked on walkscore.com. I noticed that Beaumont has a walk score of 31 out of 100, which means it's heavily car dependent. Do we have any additional data points on how Beaumont maybe stacks up to some of the surrounding areas, or kind of where we hope to be within that range?
I'm not aware of additional data, but it is interesting that there is a component of the Parks Master Plan that does also address the walkability of the city and identifies which parks are within a 10-minute walk of residential areas. And so I think that that is something that needs to continue to be reviewed.
Thank you.
Thank you. So our first road extension project that we have is I always mess up the name, Point Parkway North Extension. I can't say that fast. So this road section will reflect the roadway of Point Parkway. So this would connect Northwest Parkway to State Highway 105. So 0.6 of a mile, a little over half a mile long. These improvements will include the pavement, the drainage, the water, the sewer, the sidewalks. And our current estimated cost for the improvements sits just under $7.5 million. That's current estimates. With the rapidly changing costs of the materials for construction, of course, these changes could fluctuate, but this is our first proposal to consider. So you see here, it's kind of hard to see that red line that is connecting from the intersection of Northwest Parkway and Point Parkway, and it would continue north to Highway 105 on the east side of the LMVA Canal, where East Major Drive currently connects to 105. I think there's an Anchor Church, and there's a road right next to it, and that's where that intersection would be. So further adding to the challenges of the traffic at Highway 105 and Major Drive and RFD Road, but we're working on a plan for that as well. Our next project is the Dowlen Road Extension, and this is the lion's share of that project. This would extend Dowlen Road from College Street to Walden Road. It's just at 2 miles long. Again, the improvements include the water, the sewer, pavement, drainage, and sidewalks. This is estimated currently at just under $32 million. One of the challenges with this project is that there would need to be a bridge constructed. Oh, well, let's back.
I have a question.
Sir.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Does that dead end right, you would take, you coming over the overpass, and it would dead end right there, but you would keep it going?
Keep going.
Yes, all the way down to
Yes, sir.
Walton? Okay.
Yes, sir.
I got it in my head now.
Okay. There we go. Thank you. So, like you said, we continue south from College Street, and there are some drainage ditches. There's also an LMVA canal. The district constructed a new drainage ditch next to the LMVA canal, and that's where we would propose for that bridge crossing to be. And, you know, if you design it right, definitely can make it a nice focal point as well. We don't have a lot of bridges down here, so it's an opportunity. So this would take us to Walden Road for the $31.7 million. The next phase, let's go back. The second phase is taking Dowlen Road from Walden Road to Interstate 10. This one is just at 3/4 of a mile long, again with the water, sewer, the pavement, the drainage, and that estimated cost is just under $12 million. And we own most all of the right-of-way for this project, so there's not right-of-way acquisition costs included in these projects. So that is my last project to list. If there are any questions?
Cement is high, isn't it?
It's the limestone.
Oh.
The limestone keeps going higher and higher.
Yeah.
So, okay, thank you.
Okay, just follow up on the question about sidewalks. As you heard Molly say, you know, you get some difference of opinion. Some folks like them, some folks don't in front of their house. But there are some studies out there. The Brookings Institute, there's a study from the Brookings Institute that says sidewalks typically command 74% premium on rental homes. So a rental home on a sidewalk typically rents for more money than a rental home not on a sidewalk. And then Strong Towns and the Urban Land Institute have also done some studies on sidewalks. Urban Land Institute says that out of 15 markets that they looked at, that housing prices were substantially higher, or property values were substantially higher in 13 of the 15 cities across the U.S. they looked at based on sidewalks. It gets complicated because often sidewalks are in denser neighborhoods where you may have more access to a park anyway, but just a little bit of additional information there. Just a map showing the Dowlen Road extension, and we're ready to talk about prioritization. So Kara, I think just to make sure that we're only talking about committee members, well, first of all, we're going to get to some, we're glad to have some discussion and questions, but like last time, we thought it might be useful just to take a quick vote in case you're all already on the same page. Before we get to that, any last questions from anybody? Then, Kara, I think you want folks to... I think we're having a little trouble back and forth with the Wi-Fi dropping out every once in a while. So, again, we're going to go to Mentimeter, the same program we used last time. And we are going to ask I think it's going to prompt you to type in your name this time, just so we'll be sure that we're getting just committee members. Can you, Joey, can you just get us, I think the Mentimeter, you may have it in your, there we go. So you can use QR code, just as a reminder, or here's the code. 26637951. And Joey is available to help.
Don't go far, Joey.
I'm here. Oh, man. And the QR code is used by opening up your camera and having it on it, and it'll bring you up to a link.
Yeah, you there?
Ready?
Button first.
Would you,
I don't do QR codes.
yeah.
Yeah, that's what I said, they got it.
I do them. I just often fail at it. That's,
I did the old fashioned.
Looking, staring at the phone.
QR code will still be here, Kara says. It's right here in this corner now.
Look, put your name in there.
Okay, there we go.
And you should be prompted to register. Get out of your way. Okay, how's everybody doing? Everybody in?
Not yet. We're in.
No hurry.
I need the codes. You need the codes? Who needs the code?
Yeah, the code,
At the top.
the code again is 26637951.
We're in.
Is it giving you trouble?
No, we're in.
You're in? Everybody in? Okay, let's, oh, wait, let's see, we're showing, we should have, I think we have 14 here, don't we? Yeah, we're all in now, I believe. Yep. Everybody's, okay. All right. We've got it. So the first, let's talk about projects currently in Tier 2. Kara?
You caught up with the, okay.
Why don't y'all do on your infrastructure? So if you want to, did everybody find it on your, no.
All we have are parks, right, and trails. We don't have the drainage and sidewalks, do we?
Page 4.
Oh, page 4.
Page 4.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm sorry.
Make sure I didn't give you one from last week.
Okay, did you find this?
One more to get you done.
Everybody got your, are we gonna do one by one? All right, yeah, Joey, can you help can you kind of move around and help people find it on their matrix?
What number?
We're looking at I-7, the citywide master plan, citywide sidewalk.
Got it. That's 17.
So, yeah, I-7, the citywide park master plan, you heard Molly talking about that, so that is really, I'm sorry, the sidewalk master plan. So that's really to get in and get a consulting team in to help look at the requests you've had from citizens, evaluate those, evaluate what's needed, come up with some costs, and prioritize those individual sidewalks.
So now, our bond goes out though, so how are we gonna get all that done? Do we already have it?
No, you don't. So the idea here, and Molly, jump in if I'm misstating this, but the idea would be, in fact, let me expand on that just a little bit. So what's in there right now is a master plan and then some money to jumpstart that master plan. So the city normally puts some money in each year to pay for sidewalks. But in this case, the idea would be to do a master plan that really looks at sidewalk needs across the city, and that's probably going to cost somewhere less than $500,000. And then the rest of that money would be to begin implementing that plan. So there's substantial money in there. You all could decide as we go on if you want to raise or lower that, but right now, I think the city staff has suggested that $5 million would really make a big immediate impact on getting some sidewalks built.
So when you say implement, that does include some execution?
It does. So the master plan would come first, but then it includes a 4 to 4.5 million or 4.5 million or more for actual execution to jumpstart the plan.
And Mr. Barton, is it possible when we do run a study that we find that the increase in maybe in property values may even offset the increase in costs towards homeowners?
I think certainly that has been the case in other cities. I don't know that your city government is probably not tracking that as a metric, although I bet they'd welcome it if you wanted to and give it to them.
Yep.
Other questions? We can get Molly back up. Is that making sense? So it's money for the plan, but it is also money for execution.
Yeah, I have a comment. You know, I've heard it come up 3 times today about increased home value. I don't like increased home value. You know why? We know why. Because my taxes are going up.
Right.
I mean.
It's a double-edged sword, right? It's good if you want to sell.
Yeah, but go ahead. Yeah, that's.
Point well taken. So everybody's voted, and we've got pretty strong consensus, you know, to move this into Tier 1. Anybody disagree? Okay, so we'll be moving this into Tier 1, and we're going to move on to the road projects. Again, just a reminder, Tier 1 for now. So which one's next, Karen?
I-16.
So I-16.
Do they have to work independent of each other, or can they work independent of each other, or do they have to correlate together between the two?
What you think, Coach? Walden.
I know.
Thank you. Does anybody have any more questions for the city as we vote on this? Does that make sense?
Walden.
Okay, we've got 12 out of 16 have voted. There's 14 here tonight, so 12 out of 14.
We don't even have to.
trash can.
Got it. All right, we're missing two, for some reason, but we've got, so not in tier one. There we go. There we go. That's got everybody. So this is somewhere between 2 and 3. Do we want any discussion on this?
Before we go to the next one, is this one tied to the next, to 117?
Molly, can you come address that real quickly? Good question.
Good question. Actually, they're not tied together. And there is actually, you could segment this section from College to Walden into College to Washington, Washington to Walden, Walden to I-10. Any of the three can happen independent of each other. Yes, ma'am.
Jeff, can I just add? Can I?
Not contiguous, is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that the sections could be constructed independently. Yes. Sorry. Yes, sir. Excuse me. So in this College to Walden section, there's another major cross street, which is Washington Boulevard. So you have from College Street, as you come off the bridge, you could take it just to Washington, and then you could go from Washington to Walden, and then Walden to Interstate 10, or you could decide just to build the section at I-10, you could just the section at College to Washington. We could break it, and if there's questions and we need to do more homework to study the costs to separate it to Washington, and then Washington to Walden, we can certainly do that.
And Molly, what I understand you saying is you've presented the whole, you've presented the full meal deal, but people could break this up and just get the French fries if they want to, right? Right?
But it hadn't been broken up.
And Jeff, can I just real quick to add on to that? Molly's correct. There are two separate, distinct projects proposed, but I just do want to point out that the impetus behind this, it's been in the major street plan for a long time. As Molly mentioned, the right-of-way for all of it is already been dedicated because it's been talked about for a long time as a whole project. Again, you could do, neither, or you could do separate projects, but the idea, if you think about it, it's to take all that traffic from Dowlen and get it all the way to the interstate. And that's not just to relieve traffic, but to promote development. So you think about the intersections of Dowlen and, of course, College, now that it goes, if it were to go through, you think about the intersection of Dowlen and Washington, and that's now a hard corner with potential for commercial development, more so. If you think about Dowlen to Walden and then on to I-10, so now you're taking all that traffic off of Dowlen and getting it all the way to the interstate. So in addition to be a traffic issue, it is an economic development project. And so I'm just mentioning that because, yes, you could do them separately, but you would get a lot of bang for a lot of bucks, to be clear, if you did the whole thing.
Two questions at that point.
Would you pull up a mic, would you?
Oh, yeah.
So two questions at that point. One, Molly, if you guys did break it up, would you be able to come back and maybe explain to us which, in order of the broken up components, you guys would recommend, say, be in tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, which one would be preferred? And then to your point about taking traffic off of Dowlen, I assume you guys have some numbers, and I apologize if I missed it. My dad's medical transport came late, but I assume you guys have some numbers about what percentage of vehicles that would take off of Dowlen. That might be helpful to justify that, kind of high number that we see. And if I missed that, big apologies. I just don't see it in the deck.
Yeah, we definitely have current traffic counts. I don't know that we have projections, but we can, yeah, Molly's shaking her head no. And I will, to be honest, if you build it, they will come is also an idea. So you're also talking about inducement, where yes, you're going to maybe relieve some traffic off of some of Dallin, but you're also ideally going to be adding traffic to it further south, because hopefully there will be more businesses, more houses, et cetera, so.
That makes sense theoretically to me, but I feel like if you were selling it to the voters, having even maybe some eyeball numbers on
Right.
what you would divert from Dallin would be a little bit more impactful.
Gotcha, thanks.
So on this, we've got 58% saying either yes or maybe. We've got a pretty substantial percent saying no. So I guess I would rate this right now as kind of lower tier 2, still in the ranking. We've had some requests for information, so we'll be back to you with either homework or next time with a little bit of follow-up information, see where we stand. Does that sound good?
Yes.
Right, the next one that's,
Another comment.
sure, please.
Has it ever been presented, Chris, you said it's been discussed for a long time. Has it ever been presented as a separate bond to the citizens?
No. So it's been talked about for over 20 years, but to answer your question, no.
Yeah, because you know what I'm saying, that those three things down here and as a separate bond issue, to make sure they all get done at the same time to be more effective. That's the only thing.
So Molly, so you're going to look at the effectiveness of each segment and also at some traffic numbers if you have them, and you may not have them, and then also at least some thoughts about what the induced demand might be.
We can check our records and see if we have been approached by developers on particular segments of that as well.
Okay, so you're going to hear some more information back on this one, and the next one is going to be, Molly, you might stay here. The other Dallin Road extension, Walden to IH-10.
That's all. That's all. Definitely.
Okay, so the next section is the Dallin Road extension, and this is from Walden Road to Interstate 10. And it would connect between Walden Road and Brooks Road is where that connection, the outlet would be to the I-10 feeder road, and then it would connect at Walden Road just on the east side of the Crescent on Walden subdivision.
What's the real driving idea?
So the idea there is to encourage traffic off of I-10 for the developers who are wanting to pull that traffic off of I-10 to serve their businesses, to start drawing them off of there and then moving them upwards towards the Walden Road area, help encourage the growth and development of the Walden Road area. That area developed about 40 years ago, and it still has seen limited amount of growth, so that this mobility here would help encourage that.
Other quick questions about it?
I had a quick question. Is there any substantial real estate development that is projected to help justify some of these numbers that I'm seeing?
Yeah, just nothing specifically. So I can say that we have done some very rough estimates in terms of acreage. So in other words, if you took, let's say, the hard corner of Walden and Dallin and took a approximate number of acres of commercial development and then extrapolated that to say, look, we would get this amount of revenue as if it were, Dallin and Phelan, perhaps. Maybe that's an overestimate. But and then going out from their residential development. So we do have some very rough numbers on that. To answer your question, we're not aware of any specific projects that if we did this, they're going to come in almost immediately. We have been approached. I mentioned we've got the right-of-way, and that was contributed, I expect, by a lot of those landowners who want to promote this for future development. I will say that maybe 5 or 6 years ago, we were approached by some of those landowners specifically around Walden that were really trying to encourage the city to move forward with this section of it, especially, again, to get that traffic off of I-10, as Molly mentioned, and try to push that development into Beaumont instead of just, going right by it. But nothing specific right away.
Do you know how they would plan to zone it?
So,
The question is there a plan to zone it?
Like how you would structure it?
right, so we would probably, so just so you know, we're going through a comprehensive plan effort beginning probably later this summer. So we would look at that if we'll look at it anyway, whether or not this goes or not. But I would anticipate that we would probably have at the hard intersections, the major arterial streets, commercial, and then you'd have kind of multifamily professional off of that, and then single-family residential, multifamily beyond that. But then encouraging, high-density, mixed use, that kind of thing. But we would look at all that as part of the comprehensive plan starting this summer.
Yes, sir.
Require right away on this last spring.
Right away, Molly?
There have been some discussions with the property owner for that, and so we're hoping that we're able to move forward positively with that, with minimal investment on the right-of-way itself.
Okay, you guys ready to vote on this one? All right, Kara? Okay. There we go. All right, pretty strong maybes. We're going to, one more coming. Is there specific, you're going to hear back with some other information about the other segment. So is there anything else you really want from the city on this? Okay, great. Begin to see kind of where total numbers line up and then where the information. Great. So I-25 is Point Parkway North Extension. Molly, do you, oh, sorry to interrupt. Do you want to just give a quick on Point Parkway?
Yes, sir. So this is the connector of the Northwest Parkway that will go north and connect it to Highway 105.
Okay, this is that new road that went into the mall from Main.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so it's the-
Yes, it'll continue going north and get you up to Highway 105.
And the driving force behind it?
One is the relieving the traffic load off of Old Dallin Road and getting that traffic safely onto Highway 105. If anyone's had to make that left turn,
Man.
God bless you.
Forever. Yep.
Yeah,
Yes.
terrible. So this would relieve that traffic, open up a large area there for further development. We're seeing a lot of growth. A lot of apartment complexes have been coming in there. We've talked to developers who are interested in doing a little bit higher density residential developments as well. And so that would just help take that load off of Dallin, off of Old Dallin Road, get it to 105 and to Major.
You've got your matrix. You can see the cost estimates there. Any other questions before we vote? All right, Kara, you ready to? Will you help him do that, Joey?
Kick me out for some reason.
If it knocks you out, just raise your hand, and I won't be able to help you, but one of those two guys can.
Oh, I'm good, thank you.
On this project, Molly, the right-of-way has been donated?
Yes.
Thank you.
And I believe that the engineering would just need to be refreshed.
Yeah, all right, I know.
I don't know who did that engineering. I'd ask.
Hey, Molly, we'll donate her.
It's free, man.
Right, Chris?
All money on just got that one to leave. It's in this. Okay. I'm like that.
One, might be looking for one more? Yeah. Okay, so right on the, we've been saying 2/3 moves it into tier 1. We're just shy of that. So let me ask you all, do you want to put this in maybe, in the high end of maybe, or do you want to go ahead and move it into
I would
tier
like
1?
Tier 1. I like tier 1.
is everybody pretty much okay with putting this in tier 1 for now? Pretty strong support.
Sure.
Okay. So for now, might change. We're going to go ahead and put this in tier 1, Kara. And I believe that's good. So then you can see the tier 3 projects. If there's anything that you just really want to bring up for discussion or move in, feel free. Now, I'll remind you that in infrastructure, most of these tier 3 are really being addressed elsewhere, or at least planned to be addressed elsewhere. So again, I want to give you the opportunity, but I also want to let you know most of these are really either in the proposed budget or are identified by the CO, by the staff for COs, just another way to fund something, as we discussed.
Mr. Barton, I had a quick question about.
Sure.
I don't know if we're revisiting Parks and Trails, but was page.
Next, we're going to go to Parks and Trails.
We are going to.
So if you've got Parks and Trails, if you could just hold it for a sec.
Okay.
I would assume especially any of these projects that are safety sensitive are already being managed through some other budget.
I think if you've got one specifically, but I would say yes. In fact, I think almost everything here is actually being funded or proposed to be funded in the tier 3, right, Molly?
Okay.
Am I to understand that right? You're saying tier 3
In this
are already paid?
In this case, in infrastructure, it's not always true, but in this case, I believe all of the tier 3 are actually in the city's program to be routinely done as part of the budget, or are scheduled for certificates of obligation, which is another short-term financing way to do it. So that would still have to go through City Council and be approved as part of the budget process, but it's being recommended by staff, and I think they're expecting at this point for it to go through. Does that answer your question? All right. Well, let's move on then to Parks and Rec and the homework. As I told you, after last meeting, we sent out some homework. We got good response from most of you. And it really, I believe, are we doing facilities first or Parks and Rec first? Oh, thanks. Here we go. So just want to remind you where we are.
Yes, a question before we move on.
Sure.
Alexa.
For, what is that? I think that's I-1 in tier 3. Is that repairing the streets that are already needing repair?
Yep.
The rehabilitation program for the?
Yes, that's correct. That is our annual rehabilitation program. We budget funds every year to be paid for with certificates of obligation.
Okay. All right.
There we go. So just a reminder to check in and we've been through this before, but we're filtering down these plans. We start off at something like 1.2 billion. You could 1.1 to 1.3. Some things didn't have prices ascribed to them. Some are being funded in this year's budget. But we started off with something, north of $1.2 billion in total projects that really could be considered. Many of those we have already filtered out because they're being paid for elsewhere, or they've got a grant, or they're not urgent immediately, or you all have already moved them over to tier 3. So after that sifting, we've got about 450-ish million. Now you've got about 49 million in tier 1, 424 after Tier 2. You just moved a few things around, so that's changed just slightly. And of course, from here on, we begin talking about, what moves towards the bond. So last time we landed very specifically at Parks and Trails at 34 to 70 something million, kind of depending on Tier 1 and Tier 2, which projects were included. And then next week we're going to be talking about downtown, and that number is still moving around some, right? Because there's some talks going on with developers who may be working with the city and what projects are going to be included. But gives you this sense of where our working total begins to be. That's that 66.5 for infrastructure is what you looked at. We just took a fraction of that into Tier 1, really a small fraction, and then have a number of things moved into Tier 2. We'll be updating those for you. We've really already talked about how the matrix works. So now let's talk about parks. After the homework, we ended up with about 15 million in facilities in Tier 1, about 34 million in parks and rec, and another 37 million in Tier 2, with about 75 million in Tier 2 on facilities. Really, the police station is what we're talking about there. So we talked earlier a little bit about this homework results. So here it is on facilities, but here it is on Parks and Rec. The highest ranking, people were asked to rank them 1 through 9. So this is your average. Playground equipment, the athletic complex, field conversion, the renovation of park restroom facilities, and Terrell Park upgrades. And then you can see those are the ones that you had ranked as Tier 1 after the first meeting. And then after discussion and looking through things at home, they really still rank at the top. And there's a significant drop-off, as you can see, as you move down into those other projects. So we always like to double-check that. That really gives us a sense. And you can see there, just that numeric drop-off gives you a sense that there really is a division for what you all identify as your key projects. So there's still these community parks in Ward 1, the community park in the South End, the golf course, the Trails Master Plan, and new park pavilions. The golf course is worth mentioning just because we've got the Recs director. There was a lot of talk about it last time. How do you think about the golf course? It brings in revenue. There's some costs. You've got maintenance costs there. I think there are also different levels that you could fund the golf course. And Jimmy, I don't know if you want to speak to that, but there are some, I think you would say the full meal deal is what buys you the most bang and gets most people in, right? If you scaled it back, if I understand it, you could do drainage improvements, but you wouldn't be improving the play itself. Is that, I've probably butchered that, so why don't you enlighten folks?
No, you didn't butcher it. I just didn't want to yell from the back of the room. So as you recall, really we had 3 options. Option 1 is pretty much do nothing, which none of us really want to do. It's going to leave us where we're at. Option 2 is 14.5 million, which is taking the existing footprint, redoing all cart path, redoing every single ounce of irrigation, upgrading the greens, upgrading the tee boxes, but same exact footprint that we presently have. 19.7 million is a complete redesign of the golf course, giving us the opportunity for a full-size driving range, rerouting of the course, utilizing some areas that are not presently playable, that don't presently have tees, fairways, greens. So maximizing the rest of Terrell Park that exist from that footprint. So really the options are 14.5 to take the current course, upgrade it, make it as nice as we can make it. Probably, I mean, are you going to get more play? Sure, you're going to get more play because the drainage is going to be better. We're going to be able to get onto the course quicker after it rains. But are you going to bring people in from out of town that feel the need to come play here from somewhere else? It's unlikely. It's just going to be a better municipal golf course that is going to take a lot of money to do so. Option 3, the 19.7, is the one that we're really banking on, that people are going to see this as a regional attraction, especially if you look at what you've got for the South Loop upgrades. If people are going to come to Terrell Park anyway, if we're looking to do that in Tier 1, you know, again, we can't tell you what to do, but it's definitely something that if you're going to do it, it feels like that's really the big selling point. Yes, sir.
Jimmy, my question to you is, help stay with me, man. So the 14.5, currently where it is with the drainage and some other upgrades at 14.5, right?
14.5 is the existing footprint.
Correct.
New greens, new tees.
Correct.
Completely redo irrigation, redo cart paths. Take the existing footprint and just make it better.
Okay, so to get to 19, what do you go from there? That's 14 plus 19 or 19?
No, 14 is one option, 19 is one option.
Okay.
19 is taking some other holes, redesigning them, taking some holes, if you remember from the picture we had, you're going to take holes 7, 8, and 9 and convert that to the driving range, rerouting the course, taking some existing land and redoing it. The back 9 is going to stay fairly similar, but the front 9 is going to change quite a bit to take over some other property that's park property, it's city property, but it's not currently utilized by the golf course.
So for $5 million, just make it
It's a
plain
brand new
for
golf
me.
course.
It's
For
what?
the extra $5 million, it's essentially a brand new golf course. Complete redesign.
Okay.
Yes, sir, Mr. Beatty.
Jimmy, how did you arrive at those numbers?
We didn't come up with those numbers. An outside firm that is a golf course architectural firm, they're the ones that presented those projects to us.
How many firms did you look at?
Well, we went out for drainage study. When we went out for the drainage study, it was a RFP that a bunch of others could join into and put their proposals in. Finger Dye Span was the one who won the project, and in that 125, for the drainage study, they were required, not required, but they had the option to present this type of opportunity for us.
Hey, Jimmy, and I think this is part of being a lawyer, I'm always thinking about the jury, which is the voters here. I think that I'm a little bit ignorant probably on some of the services that the golf course offers. Can you help me with, if I were to try to articulate to somebody what this does for the larger community? Like, are there at-risk programs where younger kids can come and play on the course? Aside from the fact that obviously it's probably a discounted fee than it would be at the country club or something like that, what are some of the pieces that if I were trying to convince somebody who is looking at the optics of spending the money on a golf course when we have other needs, what can I tell them about what the golf course does that brings in the whole community? I need some education on that.
Well, I would say first and foremost, we already have the golf course, and it's failing. It's not doing well. We have very poor drainage, so if you're going to continue as is, you're probably getting close to the point where the golf course may not even be functional anymore without spending some money on it, without doing these upgrades. We're already to the point, we're already in programs where kids get to play cheaper. If I go play and I bring my son gets it, it's far cheaper for him to play than it is for me. So we already do that. Most municipal golf courses do that. It's something that's offered pretty much nationwide, but definitely locally we do that as well.
Do any of the local high schools or middle schools play on that course?
They do. That we host tournaments in addition to the schools that choose to. They can utilize that as a practice facility.
Okay, that's helpful. Public and private schools, or?
If they choose to, yes, ma'am. They all have the option.
Sure.
Some schools use different courses.
Sure.
It's up to the school.
But our public schools right now do use the golf course, is what I'm hearing.
I believe they do presently.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So when it rains hard at the golf course, how long is it down compared to other golf courses in the area?
Well, it depends. I don't want to speak ill of any other courses, of course. Kind of the
Just tell me,
benchmark.
how long is it?
Well, the benchmark locally is essentially Beaumont Country Club. It drains very quickly, which the firm that redesigned Beaumont Country Club in 2004 is this same firm that proposed this for us. The biggest key is getting back to where you're not cart path only.
Right.
As we know, most people locally don't want to play golf if they're cart path only. It takes us, if we get a half-inch in rain, we're going to be 3 to 4 days minimum before we're back off the cart paths. If we get that half-inch rain, we're probably closed the next day and even the following day to where we're not going to have play. Some courses, they don't really care if you drive on the fairways. They're not that worried about it. We do the best that we can to take care of the course to the best of our ability. So we're very cautious about when we allow people back onto the fairways with the golf carts.
Jimmy, my question is this. With a comparable city the size of Beaumont, have you been to any courses to see what they look like?
Sure, I've been to plenty of golf courses.
So, honestly, what are we ranked compared to somebody with similar size?
It's hard to say. Really, it is. There's so many criteria, Coach, that I would have to go down to be able to really answer that fairly. Some of these courses have been around as long as ours, and some of them are in pretty poor condition, and some are not. Some are newer. Some have had some capital improvements recently. I'll look at the City of Liberty, for example. They've got a 9-hole course that was just redone within the last 3 years, and people are raving about it. They redesigned it a couple years back, and so they're getting a lot of play. They're not the size of us, for sure.
Yeah.
But it's when you put something, when you put that effort and those finances into that, you're going to get something. You're going to get people talking about it, and that's really what you're looking for.
All right. Thank you.
Do you have a notion of the percentage of citizens that play golf versus utilize some of the other park services?
No, ma'am, I do not. Sir.
My question is, in the full facelift of the golf course, have you studied or going and projected what the ongoing maintenance will be afterwards? That's a big deal. A couple of things I'm concerned about is what will be the cost for the average citizen to play in the course once we do that? And will there be a savings in regard to the maintenance if you do the proper drainage and all? That is necessary on that course, because to do nothing, I don't think is an option either.
Well,
Do you have any idea or any projection of whether or not the maintenance might be a little bit less than what it is now?
the maintenance wouldn't be less. No, if you're upgrading the course, you're gonna need to hire new people. You're gonna have to beef up the staff a little bit. You're gonna have to beef up the equipment, the facilities, because you don't want to spend this kind of money and do it with a shoestring staff. You're gonna have to really improve some of the other things that we do out there for sure.
That's the first thing I'm talking about. I'm speaking in terms of the things you have to actually do to keep the course operating. Because I know what it's like, if it rains, it's hard to add on, and it just for 4 days, before you can get back on it. That would change the proper drainage and all, and that would change based upon what you're planning to do, cutting out some holes, adding a driving range, and I guess adding different holes in the configuration. I'm just concerned as to what might be the ongoing upkeep of it after that. Maybe it's spike, maybe it's just the personnel, but would it be a big spike, or would we probably better off with something that's running as it should?
Mr. Moore, I can give you some information on the ongoing maintenance. We passed out today a list of potential projects that will go on the bond referendum, and we have that sheet, and I know you probably didn't get it yet, but we'll make sure to get you a copy. But we estimate that at the 19 million full renovation cost, that the ongoing maintenance will be $121,300.
What is the current operating proposed budget for the golf course?
I don't have the current operating cost.
I have a question. If the golf course goes unrepaired or improved, is there a chance that it could deteriorate beyond repair?
I ran you off too soon.
And then my second part is it possible to phase this out?
Could it deteriorate beyond repair? I don't want to say beyond repair, but I think that the study that was presented to us pretty much proved that we need to do something. We need, as I discussed a couple weeks ago, our tees are going to need to be redone, our greens are going to need to be redone. Fairway grass is a little different than greens and tees, so they don't have as much of a lifespan that's as short. But some of the other things, such as cart path and some of the ancillary things that we have out there need to be redone. The irrigation system is 20 to 40 years old. It's got to be redone. So if we keep it going as is and just try to push through it, it's not ideal. It's just not. It's not a great situation. We make the best of it for sure, but it's not a great situation. Your other question, remind me what that was again, I'm sorry.
Could we potentially phase it out over a longer period of time, maybe in smaller chunks?
I think a lot of times when you redo a golf course, if you're going to do the 14.5 and keep the existing course as is, it's hard to give you an exact yes or no, because a lot of times what you do, you'll do 9 holes at a time. You'll close the front 9, redo the back 9. When the back 9's open, obviously then you flip-flop, so you're going to have 9 holes open at all time. If you're going to redo the entire irrigation system, which is something we definitely need to do, I think that would be tough to do. I think it would be tough with the staff that you're going to have out there and all your work. You're probably not going to shut down 9 at a time. I think that would be a little tougher. Just, again, I don't know. I wouldn't be the one performing the work, so I don't want to speak, I don't want to be clueless to it, but I feel like that would be hard to do. And I don't think you couldn't just do tees at one point and then 2 years later come in and do greens or come in and do something else. This is something that's, if you're going to do it, you're going to need to do it all at once.
Mr. Chair, I just want to have a time check-in for everybody. So it's coming up on 7 o'clock pretty quickly. Here's what I would like to accomplish, and I want you to tell me, how much time to do it in 5 minutes, or to slow it down and let us talk a little bit. We want to hear from you. Is there anything in Tier 2 that you really want to move up to Tier 1? Are we pretty good with where we are? Is there anything that can just go ahead and slide down to Tier 3? Then in facilities, we want to have a conversation about the police department, right? Especially about, do we want to keep the police department in Tier 2? What do we think about this idea of the facility study we talked about? Remember, the facility study for $400,000 or $500,000 would kind of build you towards making some decisions.
A quick question on, so Parks and Rec and facilities, I mean, I know we're getting there, but when you're looking at this, and obviously our goal is to try to get this passed no matter whether we disagree or not, where money can be used. So we're used to having some kind of, in the business world, some kind of a budget, when you're prioritizing stuff, best bang for your buck, you can add in things, you can add in a bunch of small ones, and where's that sweet
yes.
to get the voters to not be scared, right? And then what we present to get as many things as we can, and then so it seems like we're trying to separate facilities and parks and recs in this bond.
Did everybody get the question? So the idea is that there's likely to be several propositions, and we're going to talk some more about this, but I think initially, as we talked about, the deep dives are kind of broken into potential propositions. So Parks and Rec might be one proposition, facilities might be a proposition, infrastructure might be a proposition, downtown and community development might be a proposition. Then on top of that, you could take something like in Parks and Rec, let's just take the golf course, because it's a fairly big ticket item, and it's one place we all have had a lot of questions. You could have one Parks and Rec proposition and a separate proposition that just says, well, golf course. We as a committee had a lot of discussion. There's a lot of need for a golf course, but we just want to put this out to the community to decide.
Yeah. That's a heck of an option.
Right.
Like that.
Here's the program. We think these first 4 really need to go forward as, a proposition. And then you could pick any of those others to either build a second Parks and Rec proposition or standalones. And we had some discussion. I know Mr. Neal said, so, I'll kind of play him for a moment and say, you know, he would like to see everything on as an individual proposition, right? So you'd have one proposition for playground equipment, one for athletic complex. Now, I will tell you, just as your outside consultant, and you don't pay me any more to give my opinions, right? So you can, maybe they're worth nothing. But I would say that is a challenging thing to do. I would be very cautious about putting everything as an individual proposition. Yes, sir.
So my question goes back to sort of piggybacking off what John said. We talked the last time about the athletic complex potentially putting in turf for softball, and we were discussing that if that happens, the substantial increase of revenue for the city because of hotel stay and some other things like that. I might just be speaking out of terms here, but is there a way that somehow, some way, as we're going through this, we can have some sort of indication of what some of this revenue could potentially be produced from some of the things that we're doing? Because I'm thinking from a business perspective, if we're going to invest X amount of dollars, sweet spot, whatever you want to call it, what is the return on some of the things that we're doing? Thank you.
What's the ROI? And I know this is one of Christina's favorite things to talk about, or
She is.
I like her. Come on.
and just to remind you that this will be more discussion on this, but here's a preview.
Yeah, no, really, I think it's just this. Jeff's going to go through this process with y'all, and then on June 25th, which is the next meeting, we're going to be looking not only at downtown projects, but economic development, and going through some of the projects that already have been mentioned, and include those revenue projections as well. So this way, at least you're able to develop your own opinion and follow through Jeff's strategies, and then we'll follow up with some additional information to see if that's still the way you're feeling.
And then what we'd like to do also tonight, just in terms of time, because we can kind of stop and send some of this to you as homework, right? Kind of like we did last time, or we can walk through a little of this. We would like to have a quick poll tonight on kind of just where you're leaning. You've begun to see how much is out there, and you know, do you think you would support and voters would support $5 a month? And I recognizing that it's a little different for industry, but the majority of voters will be people who see their their monthly bill affected, maybe in their mortgage. $5, $10, $15, or $20, so that we can begin, starting to tinker and give you options of like, okay, to hit $15 or $10 or wherever you are, this is how it might begin to cut out.
But is it not based off your home, your appraisal of your home, the value?
Yes.
I mean, it's not going to be $5 for me. And
To be clear, yeah, let me reiterate again. When we talk about that, we're just talking about the average priced home. So if your home is $700,000, you're going to be paying significantly more than that. If your home's $150,000, you're going to be paying a little bit less.
But the percentage is the same, right?
Yeah, you'll see the percentage. You will pay more, right? But the percentage is the same. It'll be 4.5. It'll be 4.5 cents approximately.
Correct.
So if you want to,
we're not talking about a fixed value of $5. We're talking about a percentage.
Yeah, the $5 is an effort to really get it into a sense where most people out in the public who are paying attention through the newspaper, the media can kind of get a sense. Oh, okay, my house is a little more, a little less, but that's right. We're really talking about 4.5 cents per 5 million. So you'd be talking about something. Let me make sure that I'm not misstating. So yeah, so $10, that's right. So $10, so in other words, at 9 cents, okay? 9 cents generates you about 157 million. And 13 to 14 cents generates you 228 million. And that equates to, in the first case, 157 million, the average priced home, okay? And that's, the slides caveat that the average price home is about $10 a month, or for 228 million, about $15 a month.
Jeff, to answer your question, and this is just me talking, I think we'd be wasting our time trying to get $15 million. What are we gonna do with that in Beaumont? This is me talking, nothing.
Right.
86 million. What are we gonna do with that? Nothing. So I think the question is, realistically, for the voters, would be that $10 a month to that $15 a month. We can do something with that. We can't do nothing with that first two. That's give you an idea. What you gonna do with $86 million? That's me talking, thinking.
I'd love to hear a little other discussion on that.
I think that you're exactly right. And these proposed items that are studies, we're going to have to answer the voters of why they can't see why we didn't build something with that $5 million when there's so many things that we need to build with $5 million.
Absolutely.
Then you have things that like Mike said, that we don't have enough information on. The extension of Dowling Road could be the Westheimer Avenue of Beaumont, Texas.
Wow.
It could be the Westheimer Avenue. There's no other place. What's the number one place that developers and people talk about wanting to put things? Where are we seeing all the things, new things being built? Dowling Road.
Yes. It makes, yeah, I get it.
And so there's some real economic things. I mean, that extension from Point North back over to 105.
Right.
Very, very important. And I think that everything that we do or that we want to spend money on, I'd like for the voter to be able to go out there and put this finger on it.
Yes. Makes sense.
Yes.
Yes, sir. I agree.
So other thoughts about, just put it well, Mr. Chairman, dollars, right? That's one way to look at it. 86 billion, 150 million, 228 billion. I want to give you some sense of that equates to taxes. But we can take a quick vote on it if that's useful. I'd also like to get, maybe before we do, just a real quick sense from you all, the police station, because it's a big ticket item. After kind of hearing the way we've talked about that, do you want to hear from the chief briefly? Yes. Do you want to give us?
Yes, I'm okay with it. Was the chief here?
Where's the chief?
Also, Mr. Barton, I had a quick question.
Yes.
Page 2, is this a new page? Because I didn't recognize some of these items, like the repair and upgrade the basketball courts and some of these. Were those not here last time? Were they?
Joey, can you?
But they're really.
I think they were tier 3.
Okay.
I think they were just tier 3 projects last time.
Okay. Do we have an idea of how deteriorated they are? I do like the idea of new basketball courts and repairing them.
I'm just don't. Could you tell me again what number it is that you're looking at?
I could see
P29? Yeah.
To me, that would be an interesting proposition to pair the basketball and the golf together. I think you would get a better chance of success on that.
Comparing it at a point, yeah. To pair it up.
Yeah, Joey's reminding me, and maybe staff wants to jump in, but I believe those are in the Parks Master Plan, but as staff looked at them and ranked them, they're not in the CIP. So they're kind of longer range goals. Doesn't mean you can't address them. So they are in the Parks Plan. That's why we included them here, but they are not in the Community Investment Plan, which is how staff internally coordinates. And then in our first meeting when we voted on those, we did leave those in tier 3, I believe. So we can pull them out. And I want to get back to that, if you'll just take a short pause on that. Again, when we talk about police station, we don't particularly have a dog in the hunt, but what we heard from a lot of y'all, you want to do something to move towards a police station, but $75 million is a big ticket item. So one option would be do a facility study now. That facility study would look at things like the City Hall and a lot of other facilities, but it would also go into the police station, look at the architecture, look at the details, be a detailed planning document, get you some hard cost estimates.
Tim Oknishek, Chief of Police, and Assistant Chief Jason Plunkett's here too, because we both have information on this. Good evening. I see a lot of familiar faces. This building is 51 years old, built in the Cold War era. A lot of, it's built like, almost like a prison. It's not modern construction. we have a lot of issues with that building to maintain it. The price, the two of us went to a design construction conference a couple of years ago in 2023, and at that time, the estimated space needs were probably 55 to 65 million. Every year, it was approaching 7 to 21% increase every year we waited. They said, and this was a number of people that do this for a living all across the nation, they said that, you know, the last 2 years or 3 years before 2023, it had been 18 to 21% increase each year. So we're talking about if the price now, Allen just built one for 83 million. I hear 75 million tossed around a few minutes ago. Think about how much higher that's going to be if we keep dragging this out for years. This building may not last. You know, we may end up having to go to other alternatives. We're spread out into 7 buildings right now. You know, one of them's the range facility, so that's a little bit different issue. But, you know, this is something that a needs assessment 2 years ago would cost about $50,000 to do. It might be a little more now. Again, this is an urgent need. Our property, we're out of space. I know our property just got put back on the CIP. That's a couple or 300,000 as a Band-Aid to get us in compliance with state and federal law on the management of property and evidence. That's only going to tide us over for a couple years until we can get something else. So we've been pushing this off for a long time. I just want to bring that up. I'll let Chief Plunkett bring up some items.
I have a question. You know, I think very much when this first came up, the police facilities is needed, and we're in 6 and 7 different places. And I don't want to sound funny or bad. Maybe this is not the right venue, but will this help crime go down in Beaumont?
I'm not sure.
That's a big thing with everybody talking about Beaumont. And we're talking about building something new for police to help. But what's most pressing to the people of Beaumont is the crime rate.
Right. It is a factor of recruitment and retention. So in a way, it could potentially, I can't tell you if it will or not, but it has the tendency that if you have good money, that's obviously the community's putting money into keeping the police department in a modern facility, that it would help recruitment and retention.
And so that would translate into what? The recruitment and retention?
More people on the street, more boots on the ground.
So you're saying more policemen?
We have open slots right now. Keeping them filled is very difficult.
Can you talk about if there would be any technological, digital improvements that might directly impact this question of crime that might come along with it? Anything beyond facility improvements?
I don't know about that.
Yeah, so I think maybe part of what you're asking is, so in new design for a police building, something everybody's going to is, it's not just for police. So it's a community hub. People are building in classrooms, meeting rooms for, you know, public meetings, make that available. On the cost, I would just like to point out that, you know, we understand that, you know, $75, $85 million is a lot of money. But the point is, I think ultimately that money is going to have to be spent. So if you look at that, if you look at $85 million today and give it, you know, just coming up with that round number based on some of the conversations that we've had, some been higher and some been lower, depending on what we get. If we wanted to bring this back for a bond, say in 5 years, and then we started construction 2 years after that, today's $85 million is 7 years from now, $165 million. So, you know, if we look at an opportunity to get something in front of the voters and, you know, the number today is going to be more palatable than the number next year or the year after that or the year after that. As Chief pointed out, we are in multiple locations. Something that we can do, though, is we'll be able to bring officers back in to the central station, which will ease some money on what we're spending on lease or building maintenance and other facilities that we have. We have a more centralized location, so you have everything in one place. And the Chief makes a very good point about health and wellness. Health and wellness is a big deal for police officers. It is and does affect our recruiting. I've talked to people that have left here that have gone to Mont Belvieu, and one of the things that they talk about is the facilities that they work in, how much nicer it is in a place like Mont Belvieu. So those are concerns, but I think for us today, one of the things that we want to get across is when y'all are considering just think about what this money is going to be 5, 7, 10 years down the road. Chief Ogdenshake brought up our property issue. We're asking, hopefully, I believe it is back on the CIP, so hopefully we can get that Band-Aid done, but the property expansion that we're trying to do in another building is going to cost $200,000 to $300,000 this year. That's a 3 to 5 year Band-Aid. We will be out of space again before we start a new building if it got approved today. So those are all things to, that we hope everyone considers when we're talking about what we're going to put in front of the voters. And I think part of the education could be in that voter education that, again, today's $85 million is tomorrow's 165.
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
I know you're kind of going through what you're explaining just now. You gave a range of 75 to 85 million. I know the number we kind of have before was 75. Outside of these walls, there's people talking about as close to 100. The numbers that you're talking about today, is that a conservative number? Where are we on that if we're here in the section?
So what we're basing on is 2023, when we went to the deal, the numbers, when you look at the square foot that we would need for the size police department that we have, was 55 to 65, if I remember correctly. So that's been 2 years ago. 75 to 85 now. Just like you, I've seen as low, people talk about as low as 50 and as high as 85 or 90. So, regardless, if we do it, you talk about the feasibility study. The feasibility study is going to have to be done one way or the other. Whether you make it part of this project, but then you run into the problem of if we do a feasibility study in 2 years, and you're not talking about building a police department until 5 years later, you're going to have to do another feasibility study before you build it anyway. So I think 85 is a very fair estimate.
And department extrapolation, or is that something done with the city staff, that 75 to 85 numbers we're talking about? You said, based upon 2023, the data you received,
right,
kind of the growing rate. I didn't know if that was something that was actually put before us. Is that something internal to the police department or the city?
That was internal to the police department. That was the information that we got at the symposium that we attended in 23. And I think, we talked to several vendors, and they were all very close. They do this for a living. They see how many officers you have. We tell them how many other programs we have, the community programs that we run. So we do a lot of community work out of the police building. We have Citizens Police Academy. We have our cadet program. All of the things that we do, and plus all the regional training. We're the largest police department in a region, and we bring in hundreds of people a year from other agencies into our facilities to train. So, there's a lot that goes on. It's not just a place that police officers go, park their car, get in another car, leave, or go sit down at a desk. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in the police department. And we're spending a lot of money every year on the building that we have just to keep it running, and we're out of space. A good point to make, and I'm sorry we weren't here last time we were out of town. Just so everyone's aware, when the building was built, the building was designed for 130 police officers and about 25 civilian employees. So currently today, we're authorized for 260 police officers, and we have about 70 civilian employees. Okay, good, great.
Do y'all have this location?
No, no, but that, the estimate that we're looking at would include the site, I believe. I believe there's enough there to include the site. Yes, sir.
Thanks very much. Thanks for being here. Let me take a shot as an outsider at kind of setting the table for you on police, because it's really complicated. You do have some money. They need storage for records right away. So if you're going to put this on the bond, pardon me? Sorry, evidence records, right? Yeah, evidence, thank you. So they need an evidence room, evidence storage right away. City staff is trying to figure out, well, that's something they can put and fund in the current budget, right? To make $300,000 or $400,000 to renovate a building, I believe. So if you're going to put this on the bond, they'll pull that out of the budget, perhaps, because you're going to move towards a new building. If not, they're going to put that in the budget, not the bond budget, but just in the regular city budget, to buy some time. Several of you asked questions about dollars. This is one of the issues that we've raised and talked to your staff about. I don't think the dollars are very clear right now. And I think that's one reason it was kind of on the out years originally. So if you look at actually what's in there, 60 million or 65 million is what got talked about staff. We put a pretty big contingency up there because that seemed uncertain to us because there just wasn't a lot of detail that we could find. And then there's inflation on top of that. So I think, you know, the chief and the assistant chief are completely right. Costs will go up if you don't do it now. Now I would say, I don't think they're going to double in the next 5 or 7 years, but they're going up. Construction costs are typically going up a little higher than inflation. That's true for all the construction that you're doing. So I think your option, it seems to me, is either say we're going to go out and do a study and really get a handle on the costs in advance, figure out where it's going to be maybe, get a handle on costs, really get a handle on also programming. By that I mean, you know, how many officers are we going to need, not just in 3 or 4 years, but in 10, how many evidence rooms you need, and not rely on a square foot cost, right, a generic square foot cost, but really nail it down. Or you can say, well, the need is so critical that it is just a rough cost, and we're going to come up with a number, and then we're going to have to decide what is that number. Is it 65 or 75 or 85? And then you're going to have to be comfortable going out to the community and saying, you know, you're right, we don't know exactly, but we've put a big chunk of money in, and then we're going to hire an architect and a programmer to build to the budget, right? So you can either design it and then build for long term, or you can just say, well, this is all the money we got, and, you know, get me a car that costs, this is what I've got in my account, this is how much I can pay,
right.
Which car on the lot works?
Yes.
And maybe what we could do is let you all think about that and design some polling that you could do at home. First of all, we're glad to stay as late as you guys want to stay. I just know that we're beginning to...
Yeah, we are.
We're beginning to tax everybody's mental energy at some point. Could we take a real quick vote on this? Mr. Chair, you had some comments, and we could put it up. It might make it the easiest way. We'd love just to get you to vote on, or would you, on just numbers is all I was going to say.
Yes, sir. I think we can. You can put an X by that 5 or 10, that 5 or 10.
That ain't gonna do nothing.
No, that wasting somebody's time, yeah.
Yeah, listen, if this isn't useful, let's just talk about it.
No, I think it's very useful, but...
Yeah, let's have a little discussion.
I already said my piece, 15 to 20, that's my piece. That's mine.
Yeah,
Yeah, just go back to Menti, you can go back to Menti on your phone, menti.com, and the code is up at the top here, 26637951. Again, menti.com on your phone, and it's 26637951, 26637951. That's at the top of the screen, but I know it is a little bit hard to read. 26637951.
Kara, can I ask you a question? This is whether you feel, meaning me or the people, that the citizens of Beaumont. That's a better question, or?
I think the question is, as a committee member, when you put something out to the voters, what do you feel comfortable with at this point? What do you think you ought to be recommending to the voters? What's most useful, taking into account both what people can afford and what you can get done, right, from what you've begun to see? Yeah. So I hear you. Those colors are, I think that
I got it, though.
if you're a little colorblind like me, it gets tough.
In the 15?
I think that's the defaults for Menti. Okay, so we've got, we may be down to 13 people now, so that's most of us that are still.
Andy left.
Yeah, we've got some that left.
Oh, yeah, so we're down to 12. So that's all of us, okay. So not much, so you can see
That wasn't me.
where we are. We'll record this and feed this back to you guys, and then let you guys begin to think about where is the sweet spot between that. Most of you are at somewhere between $10 and $20 a month. That's what it boils down to. So I think that begins to give us a range, and we'll get you some additional information about, okay, where you are after tonight, and what does that mean on this range. And then remember, the next meeting, we've got, there's a lot of dollars on this next meeting when we talk about downtown and community investment and economic development.
Yeah. But we're going to talk more about the police station.
If you guys.
No, not tonight, but are we going to talk?
Yes, we will talk more about the police station, and on the police station, we're going to send you some homework with everything we talked about tonight. And by homework, I really just mean some polling. Let you kind of feed back to us after hearing some of this tonight. Where are you? And I think you had another question about parks.
Mr. Barton, just one thing, and because I didn't recognize some of these items, including the basketball courts, but going back to what Mr. Wilson mentioned earlier, you know, when we're talking about bang for your buck, if we're thinking about 14 to 19 million for a golf course, $500,000 to repair and upgrade our basketball courts makes sense to me as something that maybe could move up to tier 1 if everyone's in agreement. And then if we're doing that, you know, the pavilion makes sense considering the heat, considering, you know, the summertime.
So I think that's something that maybe we should, from listening to y'all, maybe that's something we'll offer up in our questions this time. Are there specific projects? Now as we're starting to get to this area about, well, are there little dollars here or there that don't cost much that might be big bang for the buck? We'll invite you to feed those back to us and get them back to you. I will say, I guess, Kenneth Regett, is there anything that you want to say that you think, or administration in terms of Parks and Rec, that provides a lot of bang for buck? I know we talked a little bit about Trails Plan. That's something that's a small amount of money that I think you think, yes, is useful, but it's not necessarily the immediate need, right? And it got ranked fairly low by committee, and I think staff is saying, yeah, that kind of makes sense. Is there anything that you guys want to mention as small cost, bang for the buck?
All right. Again, Kenneth Regett, Director of Parks. One thing that didn't get placed on is with our splash pads. We talked about our playgrounds needing improvement, but our splash pads need to be improved as well. and it's right around maybe 500,000 to do all those 9 splash pads that we have to do an upgrade. Right now, we have 2 that you could say are down. We have to wait on vendors out of Houston to come and do repairs on them. The reason why for those repairs is because all the electronics are located underground. Just by taking those electronics and putting them above ground, will eliminate a lot of those repairs.
That makes sense to me to pair with our playground improvements too. It's the same concept, and it does seem like a low dollar amount.
So what we're going to do is give you the results of tonight, where we stand on dollars. We'll have a upgraded, updated Tier 1, Tier 2, kind of what the rough tax impact is so far, right? If you were to do nothing, we know we've got a big discussion coming next time, right? But here's where we are so far. Then we're going to ask you about the police station. We've talked a lot about it. Let you think about that. What are your thoughts? Facilities, police station now. Just come up with a budget and we'll build to it, or do we do a study and figure out the budget, long needs, and we're going to get to proxies.
Once we come up with a number, what type of strategy will we have to convince the citizens that that's our plan?
Well, I can answer that 2 ways. Let me mention 3 or 4 things. One, I suspect that every single person on here, as far as I can tell, as an outsider, is an influential member of this community. So I think your friends and neighbors and business associates are going to be asking you what you think, and the city's going to love it if you go out and give your honest opinion about what you think. If the council moves forward with this, you've got a communication staff that will be putting that out, and then I will say that most of the cities we work with, not all, but most, have a special effort, whether it's a firm like ours or some other firm or somebody to really take this kind of information and push it out. I would argue that if you're talking about a $100 or $150 million bond, then it's really worth your time to put out a mailer, right? The way people would in a political campaign that doesn't advocate, but just make sure that everybody in the community has some information, that you do some social media to make sure that people have good information about your proceedings. This is also a good time for me to mention to you all, but for anybody who may stumble on this, or for the press that might be here, that all of these presentations are available on the website and will continue to be. We'll update it by tomorrow. This will be on there and people can listen and learn. Kara tells me it's already up. So our presentation is up, but the city will also be doing the audio that people can listen to. Mr. Chairman, one quick issue. We also had a member ask, how do we feel about proxies? And by that, proxies is just if somebody can't be here, can you give your vote to somebody else as we get near the end, as we get to really kind of voting, particularly for that final meeting. I don't think we need it before we get to that final meeting, but at that final meeting, do we want to allow people who have to be out of town to give somebody else on the committee they trust?
Well, I did mention the proxy, but it was a non-voting proxy.
Oh, my mistake.
Not necessarily someone that could actually vote for it, but just to sit here and listen to the information and give it back to the individual.
I think then, unless you object, Mr. Chairman.
I don't have a problem with that. Understand it better that you're asking that if we can have somebody to sit in for somebody. Yes. I have no idea. I don't know.
Not to vote, just to sit in.
I think from our perspective, if they're not voting, it'd be fine for them to sit in. And then I think the separate question is, when we get to that last meeting, do you want to allow another member of the committee to vote for you? We started off kind of leaning against that. We really want as many people to be here as possible and listen to the debate for that last meeting. But it's something we could think about and talk about next time.
Yes, sir.
If you all...
I hadn't thought about that. If that would be a problem for the last meeting on the voting.
Right. Or if somebody says, I can't be there, but I'm not even going to give, I'm going to send in writing what I'm for and how I want to vote. So
that's another option.
We'll just be aware, we'll think about that. Next time, we are going to be talking about return on investment. We're going to be talking about these downtown projects. that are coming up. Kara, Joey, anything else we need to cover? June? All right. Is there anything you all want us to specifically poll the committee about while you're out, or information you want us to bring in next time? Feel like we're making progress?
A lot of it.
Yeah.
We're drilling down, right?
We are drilling down. We're drilling down. Listen, you've been extraordinarily patient. Thank you guys for your time, Mr. Chairman. That's it for us.
Thank you. June, Chris, thank you guys, man, as always, and your staff. They are giving us, you know, so much information to make decisions about what we do, and it's really helpful us. And thank you guys so very much. And to this committee, man, you guys hanging in there and have some great questions. A lot of knowledge in here, and I appreciate it. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.